The 2025 Canadian Grand Prix. Montreal, the absolutely gorgeous city home to a certified hood classic, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, named after the legend himself, Gilles Villeneuve, who obviously tragically passed away at Zolder. And what an honor it is, because this circuit is just great, from its unique pit lane entry to the Wall of Champions where the F1 direction wasted no time to pull out the freaky graphic for, and of course its flowing middle sector where drivers fight for the DRS like Hamilton and Alonso did in 2013, or cut grass and take others out if your name is Carlos Sainz, with a lot of overtaking opportunities that make me go, yes. And to top it all off, we also get occasional wild animals, and who doesn't love those kinds of circuits? It is also the home race of two of the most legendary talents in F1 history, one of which busted his wrist after a generational crash out in the garage last race, just legendary driver stuff, but unfortunately, and it's with a heavy heart that I must deliver these news ladies and gentlemen, but Stroll will in fact be taking part in this Grand Prix. But despite that, to say that I'm excited for this race is an understatement, especially after Spain that got Max like one naughty word away from getting banned. But now that we've had time to process that absolute madness, let's see what Max has to say. He probably apologized for the disgrace, realized his mistake, and regrets. It's okay guys, he doesn't really mean it, his dad probably just beat him extra hard after Spain, so he lost his. Man, being a certified Max meat rider right now is harder than being a Kanye fan in 2025. But you know what's crazier than both of these statements? It's the fact that this means Max genuinely does not give a shit if he gets a race ban. Bro chose the F1 open lobby hill and is 110% willing to die on it. And all it took was a few laps around the Nürburgring in a GT3 car. Which is cool but crazy at the same time, because I for one genuinely thought we would never see this Max ever again, especially after he achieved his goal of winning the championship, but turns out being a sim racist took its toll, which is relatable. This weekend also marks Haas's 200th Grand Prix. They grow up so fast. To celebrate this, they have made a special one-off livery that has actual effort put into it for once. This is because it's a throwback to their first ever GP in 2016, and I think it looks pretty gas, and they even got the race suits to go with it. The 2026 calendar was also unveiled, and don't ask me why that's the case when we're literally not even halfway through this one. But anyways, this calendar actually surprised me, because I was fully expecting them to commit to 25 or even 26 races, but they actually stuck to 24. But with that being said, it's still very imbalanced, with 3 races in the US, 2 races in Spain, and none in Africa. While some tracks are good, I will never forgive them for still nuking Imola and keeping Monaco until the end of time, all whilst also happily putting these two monstrosities drawn by 5-year-olds in. F1 has also decided against an event like F1 75 next year, which is a little bit sad because I think it turned out alright, especially since most car launches are ridiculous yapathalons anyway. In other news, Red Bull Academy driver Arvid Lindblad also got his FIA Super license approved, which means Mr. Mo Lester will start using all 2 of his brain cells to end Lawson's career by already replacing him and ruin Hajar's by drafting him into the second Red Bull seat, which may as well be an electric chair at this point. I say this not only because Lawson is an honorary member of the Bin Laden family, but also because Arvid isn't even 18 and shouldn't get his license had Red Bull not actively asked for it, which I think is a sign that they're panicking since they're realizing that Max might not be staying, and all they'd be left with is a car no one can drive and no future prospects. I personally wouldn't be surprised if Arvid performed as well as Hajar did, minus his Australia blunder. And whilst I think it's a bit unfair towards the terrorist, he at least got to see the halfway point of the season, unlike a certain Australian driver who may or may not have driven for Alpine. Jack Doohan. Free practice 1 early on was actually surprisingly competitive, as McLaren weren't 1-2 by 40 seconds for once. As a matter of fact, it even looked like they were struggling, especially with Norris, who went off and kept going wide into turn 10. Now this was more than enough for me and a lot of other fans to start overdosing on hopium, but one fanbase in particular was overdosing harder than all of us, as Williams were 2 and 3 by under a tenth behind Max Verstappen, who got blocked a few times. Lance Stroll missed the session because he still had problems with his wrist, Charles Leclerc went into a patch of dust that made him lose control and completely destroy his car, red flagging the session in the process. Hamilton spun in turn 10, Franco Colapinto spun on his first flying lap, Antonelli, who had an awful triple header, almost crashed. Gabby almost hit Albon as traffic continued to be an issue, with both Verstappen and Alonso having similar moments. But in the end, this was the finishing order. Free Practice 2 was a bit less eventful, as the teams were doing race simulations, which saw McLaren regain some of their pace as Norris was in P2. Ferrari's mechanics didn't have enough time to fix Charles' car, so he had to miss the session. Lance Stroll crashed after about 3 seconds, traffic congestion was a problem, which is becoming a bit of a theme in 2025, Colapinto spun once more in turn 2, seemingly everyone was cutting the last chicane, Gasly almost did a George Russell, and this was the order after the flag fell, with the Mercedes flying and Tsunoda all the way down in 11th, probably because he was busy doing whatever the fuck this is supposed to mean instead of locking in. He then nearly missed third practice because Red Bull were working on his brakes, which means he was dead last. A lot of people were going off track, like Albon and Alonso, and mingling with the Wall of Champions, with Piastri hitting it and red flagging the session. Hülkenberg nearly crashed, and Behrman miraculously survived as well. Now this red flag absolutely ruined Tsunoda's weekend, because he overtook under it, landing him a 10th-place grid penalty. Hadjar was then doing a Colapinto impression, whilst Max seemed to be struggling, probably because Red Bull replaced his car with this thing, but who knows. The lap times then kept trickling down, with Norris being fastest and Piastri being off the pace. In Q1, Oli seemed to be struggling still, and so did Hamilton as they cut turn 1. The tire situation was all over the place, as some were on mediums and some on softs, which led to the order being shuffled around all the time. Albon's engine cover then completely exploded, I wonder where I've seen that before, which then brought yet another red flag. After the restart, McLaren were 1-2, followed by the 2 Ferraris. Colapinto came alive, Lawson and Stroll got crushed by their teammates, and Carlos got eliminated because Hadjar's engineer was having a wank. Q2 early on saw the top 3 being within less than a tenth, with Leclerc and Russell joining them later on, as Alonso was absolutely flying on the mediums again, and Behrman was still fighting his Haas. Colapinto was 12th, which really is 11th, because Tsunoda was gonna start last either way because of that penalty. Q3 was now the battle of who can make their tires work best, and what a battle it was, as the top 4 came out swinging immediately, with Max coming out on top, and Norris missing the final chicane. During the second runs, Ferrari completely bottled it, getting 8th and 5th. Ferrari, more like fucking trash, am I right? Norris then also choked, putting his car in 7th, but it was George who put in a sensational lap to get pole, followed by Max, just like last year. Now that the grid has been set with Israel and Iran lined up next to each other, it was time for the race to get going. The lights went out and both George and Max got good starts. Piastri on the other hand got overtaken by Kimi, and Albon was pushed wide and had to take to the grass, losing 3 positions in the process. Meanwhile, Verstappen started chasing Russell, however the dirty air made it impossible to get past. This was made worse by the fact that tire degradation was so high he had to pit by lap 12 to avoid fighting Kimi. Norris got past Nando to the surprise of no one, Russell then had to respond to Verstappen, starting a cascade of pit stops. Antonelli made a beautiful move on Hülkenberg, and Sainz made his weekend even worse, as his teammate who had a PU issue and gave it up to Mercedes to build the least reliable engine on the grid was not only fighting the car but also his team, which no doubt ruined his amazing weekend as he was falling like a brick. And while most people opted for the 2-stop, Norris and Leclerc decided to go long. Well, Leclerc decided to go long, should I say, but Ferrari had another idea in mind. Behrman's struggles continued even through the race as he went off into the grass. Verstappen was brought in for his second stop on lap 38, triggering the second phase of pit stops, after which the race turned into a complete snooze fest. Albon's miserable race finally came to an end on lap 49 as his PU finally gave out, but later on, the race finally came alive again as the top 5 were very close to each other, especially Piastri and Antonelli, who were absolutely sending it, but as they cut traffic, it became more of a fight between the 2 McLarens as Kimi pulled away. Meanwhile, one of the terrorists' last races for RB ended with him retiring from 19th. And whilst all of that was happening, Hülkenberg was cooking with a phenomenal strategy up in 8th. Fast forward a few laps, and the Norris-Piastri fight got very close. Perhaps too close, as a few corners later Norris completely drove into the back of his teammate Piastri, going for a gap that did not in fact exist.
And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
Ruining both his and the McLaren's weekends, bringing out the safety car, under which the race ended because F1 loves to ruin races by wasting 30 laps behind the safety car instead of using the damn red flag. But at least this guaranteed a podium for my boy Antonelli and got some points for Fernando Alonso, probably thanks to the mustache. The championship fight was now even more in favor of Piastri, obviously, and brought Max closer to Norris. And the constructors, Ferrari fell back down to 3rd amidst all the controversy surrounding Vasseur getting sacked, and Leclerc potentially leaving, which is not great timing. Alpine also remain in dead last with their terrible car, horrible management, and are yet to find a permanent team principal, making them truly one of the worst F1 teams this past few years. But if you want to learn more about the absolute worst teams in F1 history, click on the video on screen right now, and see ya.